Hello, everyone, and welcome to Perceptions with Chris Gutman. Dear listeners, my apologies. It's been a while since I posted anything. I set the goal of posting something once a month just to see if that's feasible for me, and as life has it, over the last few weeks, too many things came together at the same time. So I've not been able to uphold that aim, but I'll do my best to recover and make up for this. That being said, I'm very proud to present this most recent episode, not only because of the content, but the challenge I had to overcome editing my first face-to-face audio recording. This is a conversation with Asena Boyadzhieva and Tama. They founded an organization called Kometa, which offers workshops for students bringing the latest discoveries in cognitive science to the classroom. I had the good fortune of observing one of their workshops they were doing at our school. And this is what I would consider to be true educational innovation, implemented at the front line, in the classroom, not in some far-removed ivory tower. We talk about transformational learning, helping young people develop their inner compass, and training attention to be present and receptive to what life has to offer, instead of letting it pass you by. Asena and Tama offer some intriguing insights. They're not afraid to voice their opinions, and they see a future for young people with more self-determination to take better care of their own lives and contribute to making a better future. I've put the link to their social media landing page on Linktree in the description. Without further ado, I present Asena Boyadzhieva and Tama. Hello everyone, and welcome to Perceptions with Chris Gutman. I have two special guests with me. Would you please like to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Tama, and this is Kometa.
Hi, I'm Asena Boyadzhieva.
I have to point out, Tama and Asena are using one microphone, and I have to lean forward and share, so please bear with me that there will be some decision-making and pauses as to who says what and when. I happened to stumble across a workshop that you were doing in our school, and could you tell us more about how you guys got together and how you guys decided to start what I think is true innovation?
Thank you. So perhaps we should start there with a little bit of history. So Tamas and I both studied cognitive science at the University of Vienna. And during our studies, we thought, wow, it would be great if we can somehow translate everything that we're learning into something understandable, something that we can give also to young learners, because there's some things that we wish we knew earlier. That idea kind of took some time to really grow. But after some time, we got together and we figured out that we really want to do something.
Yeah, I think both of us were interested in what we had learned about, kind of what Asena said, this idea that things we learned in cognitive science seemed very relevant to people's lives and seemed like information that would be important. But we were also both frustrated by how theoretical and abstract it all was. Mm-hmm. And so we ourselves, we practice different kinds of embodied knowing, such as contemplative practice. Asena does dance, and we do all kinds of different kind of techniques to get to know ourselves, as well as kind of knowing about the things that we study. And I think we both felt that this combination of looking inward as well as looking outward and getting information from other smart people and theories and all that, this could give a unique combination for what is essentially transformative learning, where you truly not only hear knowledge and kind of listen to knowledge, but you internalize it on deeper levels. This is essentially what allows you to behave differently once you learn something rather than just remembering it.
Yeah, this is a term I've not heard before, transformational learning. And I think it's actually what every teacher wants to achieve, I believe. I mean, I'm making a huge assumption here, but I do think you as a teacher, you do want your students to get the knowledge that you're transferring, but you do want them to be able to make their own thing out of it and make the necessary changes in their environment as a result of it. There's this aspect of giving information. You got to keep it until the assessment, until the exam. You have 2 weeks to learn this. You got to learn it now. And then they kind of regurgitate it during the assessment, and then we hope that something will stick. I think we pray that something will stick. But yeah, this is a fascinating idea of what you call transformational learning. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that it really is well contrasted to the type of learning that you explained, which is more of a bulimic kind of learning. So
is that a thing? Is that a term?
Yeah, it is a term.
No, it's not.
It is a term. I swear it's a term.
Bulimic learning. I love it.
Yeah,
it's good.
You take it in, you then spit it out whenever you don't need it anymore.
It's an accurate description.
We actually had a workshop which was on the topic of learning. And there we defined learning as the act of changing yourself. So, and this happens all the time, but I guess in learning, we also try to direct that process a little bit. This direction, we believe, doesn't need to be steered so much from the outside if you get children and young people to really attune to their inner compass, because then the learning is also intrinsic. As beings, we want to learn. We want to, I believe, also develop positively, but we need the right environment to do that. And I think that's what we try to create, the right environment for learning, so that students can do that themselves, because you can't force anyone to learn.
Yeah, I think there's a unique combination where, like Asena said, there's an inner compass that everyone carries, and that this inner compass is essentially what guides you towards the changes that you want to make, that you're willing to make. Really, the role that we see ourselves having is the kind of encouragement of exploring through your inner compass ideas and concepts and experiences. And so Cometa aims to be something that promotes transformative learning by essentially providing the kind of space, asking the kind of questions, providing the kind of input that allows students to kind of sit for a while and digest the information instead of, as Asena said, just spitting it back out, right?
There's this belief that if you go home and study, that is happening. Right, that there's this underlying thing. You have to go do your homework and you have to repeat and memorize and understand the concepts and just repeat until the axons get myelinated enough for you to be able to give this information back. I mean, it's very superficial if you think about it. But how else do you assess? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is kind of partly coming from the structure of education, right? We want students to reach certain milestones and to be able to measure outcomes. And so we force them to really conform to the outcomes that we demand of them. This is a very top-down, very outcome-oriented way of education. Transformative learning aims to encourage agency and encourage the students to find their own paths, their own ways of change. And it kind of gives them guideposts. It's obviously, it's not about just letting the students figure everything out for themselves. It's about providing input to them, questioning what they believe, but also allowing them to form their own ideas and to really explore certain ideas in different modalities, right? Through the body, through the mind, through conversation.
I observed one of your workshops. Yeah, so I went up to the third floor and had the chance to watch one of your workshops. On the one hand, you were explaining what attention is, how it actually works. And you know what the funny thing is, when I studied education, when I did my master's, I thought to myself, we learned a lot about some theoreticians from the 1970s or 1960s.
It would be great if we learn about this even in school, because nobody really gives you a guidebook to being human and about how your attention works and how to steer it, especially in times where everything is trying to grab your attention.
Exactly.
There's I want to say that wasn't that big of an issue. Perhaps it always was to some extent, But with modern technology, they are explicitly designed. Attention is the currency. And for us to know how to really steer it in a direction that we want to have freedom in deciding what we pay attention to or not, it helps to know how attention works. But that's not enough. As you pointed to before, a lot of what we learn tends to stay on the superficial level because we only learn on that level. We only learn on the level of cognition. But if we really want to integrate something, we need to also learn through the body, through engaging all of the senses. And with attention, that's also the case. So you may know that social media is, just making profit off of your attention span. But to really do something about it, you need to have better alternatives. You have to have tools that help you make a different choice.
How would you define attention?
So, I mean, it really depends who you're asking. I really like Amishi Jha's kind of way of looking at it, where it's essentially something that regulates many different parts of your mind and your whole kind of mind-body system, which is that it allows you to regulate your emotions. It allows you to practice presence, so you have kind of responsibility to what's going on around you.
It's good term. Responsibility.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And also that it essentially is helping you also train what you pay attention to. This is kind of a tricky term because attention is in this definition, but what I mean is kind of where your focus goes to. So what are you looking at something specifically? Are you trying to internalize information that you're reading? This is really kind of a more task-based kind of attention. But attention, as it seems to be, as people are studying it, it seems to be that it is a lot more complex and related to a lot more things than we initially thought it was. So it's really about guiding what you would call allostatic processes in the body, helping the body essentially figure out what is relevant for it and what is information that it can ignore and pretend is not there.
To select and to differentiate.
Exactly.
Okay.
When you look at traditional psychology textbooks, you see attention being kind of a separate chapter, a thing that can be examined on its own. But it seems like attention is something that flows in between. It's more the thing that I like this metaphor of it being a spotlight, of being the thing that you kind of use to gain a better granularity of what's happening. And when you have that granularity there, you also have more degree of freedom of what you can do.
I have to share a personal story. We had lunch together many times when you used to work here, and you are, I would say, a very mindful person, especially when, if I may say so, especially when you eat. Yeah, when we had lunch together, we talked about mindfulness several times, but you seem to really take your time and I find myself sometimes just gobbling food up. I'm just shoving food in my face. I eat far too quickly, but I'm not really paying attention to where does this come from? How does it really taste? What is the texture in my mouth? And, it's something that I often think about, actually, that, you should take your time when you have a bite or when you cut. What does it feel like to actually cut with a knife and to take a sip of water? I'd love to have more of in my life that you actually, you kind of enjoy every moment of what we take for granted. I think most of the time, when I'm eating something and I have to go somewhere else and my mind is somewhere else and I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. And it's something I discussed in my previous podcast as well with Prince Will, is that this is one of the hardest things, is to come home and switch my mind off and be with my children and give them my attention. You want to give your child your undivided attention without thinking about, oh my God, what do I have to do tomorrow? And this thing, and then I have to pay that bill and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, that's where there's so much potential when we align our attention with our intention. And
yes, yeah.
it's really not easy to do, of course. We're overflooded with stimuli, we're overflooded with information. And at the end of the day, it's just difficult to really have enough resources to dedicate your attention to what you really want. But it means a lot to me that you sometimes think about
I do
lunch.
actually consciously make a decision not to, but to pay more close attention to what I'm currently doing here and now. Yeah.
See, I actually consciously try to use the eating time as a practice.
Right.
Because my attention goes in a million places. But I have this time where I say, okay, like I'm here with my food and
Yes.
I can, really enjoy it and appreciate it, and also think about not just myself, but everything that went into this food being with me now. Because when you think about it,
It's gone through a
everything.
journey, hasn't it? It's
Exactly.
gone through this massive journey. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, to a certain degree, you can't pay attention to everything either, right? It's just too much going on. But we can definitely make an effort to do more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely can't pay attention to much more, but I think you point to one thing that I think is related to a lot of our problems, and the fact that we are a bit disconnected from, like you go to the supermarket, you get something and you don't see all the work that came before that. And that kind of contributes to us feeling a bit more isolated, not realizing really the interdependence of everything and how we are always relying on just a long history of events and people and resources for us to be here. And I think that's a key element of also well-being and gratitude. So that's something that's worthwhile paying attention to.
Yeah, and this is also something that we try to address in the workshops.
Yes. Yeah.
So the way our current offering is, the way we've designed it is that we address kind of these issues that exist in the world today, and we try to point to the underlying kind of common thread between them. So our first 3 workshops, explore being and attention, and then kind of this embeddedness in society and the world. So what Asena was talking about, that really you are part of this long process and there's this sense of interdependence. This is something that I think people are not aware of, because we really don't train our attention to be present and realize just how much complexity is around us. And so the idea behind the workshops is that you can kind of break this down. You start with the self, so you understand, how does this boundary work? What am I? Where do I start? Where does the environment start? Where does everybody else come in? And how am I related to this? Then you move on to attention to understand that really you are regulating and changing and exploring through your attention your own kind of self, your own boundaries, and what is relevant to you. And then you move on to the third workshop, which explores how we then fit into this kind of larger system, this larger complex system where everything is interdependent. And like you said, it's not necessarily the best thing to become overwhelmed and attuned to everything all the time. It's just not possible. But you can learn to focus on your place within the system. So this is what systems thinking is about, that you recognize your place in a larger whole and you don't try to understand the whole all the time. You just kind of learn how to fit into it and follow your own intuition and follow your inner compass to help you navigate the complexity.
I seem to remember a conversation we had a while back about my frustrations with meditation. Like I was trying it, and I listened to Jack Kornfield and Tara Brach. I think they had like a podcast or something. I was meditating and kind of worked, kind of didn't. She said, focus on the breath. And then I tried the rain thing. I don't know if you're aware of that. Mm-hmm. And then someone made fun of me. We were trying to find some event, and I couldn't find it. I got very frustrated. And he said, I think you should be more Zen or something like that. Because we talked just before that, we talked about meditation. And I think one of the great challenges, or what people want, is you want it to transfer into your daily life.
It's a great challenge indeed.
Yeah.
But I think there are also sometimes what can be discouraging is that we have these expectations that, okay, we do mindfulness to get somewhere, to achieve
be
something,
more zen.
to be more zen.
To be more zen, yeah.
To, like whenever there's a red light that we're going to be totally cool about it. But that's not the case, and that's okay. Like being human is also being okay with all of your emotions. And I think, that's part of mindfulness, to just recognize how you're feeling and be like, oh, okay, that's a feeling. I don't need to identify with it, though. I can let it go. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So things are not as sticky. They come and they go, and they can be. They're allowed to be just as they are.
And also just this idea that mindfulness is not about this strict maintaining of focus on something. I think a lot of the mindfulness basic exercises that you can find on apps or videos or whatever is really about focusing on your breath.
Yes.
And it's kind of like training your attention to be more focused. Yeah. And this is kind of a fundamental misunderstanding of what mindfulness is about. Mindfulness is about maintaining presence and allowing for your attention to kind of shift back and forth, kind of maintaining that awareness to be able to guide it back to the breath. And so what this translates to in everyday life is that you don't necessarily just sit in like calmness or focus all the time. It's that you're better at noticing when your mind is trying to kind of grab your attention and really drag you into a certain thought or a certain spiral or whatever. You're better able to just maintain a bit of distance from all the different kind of thoughts that come and go in your mind. And you're better able to have intention, and you're better able to self-regulate, and you're better able to really pick and choose what thoughts you focus on.
What is wrong with a teacher saying, hey, focus. You need to focus now. Focus on this. What is the... It doesn't work. I mean, I can tell you, it doesn't really work. I wonder to what extent we're expecting people to control something they can't actually control.
Yeah, well, first of all, people don't like being told what to do. I think that's, especially teenagers. But also, as you said, like we have control to some degree, but it's also a skill. And you can't expect somebody to just, like flip a switch and be like, oh, thank you for telling me that. Now I can focus.
Where have you been all my life?
Exactly. Because a lot of the times I find that young people, they also want to have their attention in grip. But first of all,
too. That's true.
Their like prefrontal cortex is just not mature. And that makes it all the more difficult to deal with impulse control and all of these things that are grabbing for their attention. And they live in times where, as we talked before, there's just so many things making it even more difficult for them to stay focused for longer amounts of time. So it's not enough to say that. You have to really create the right conditions and to somehow find ways to spark their intrinsic motivation, which I think happens through interest. And that's really hard when you are dealing with a curriculum that they need to follow strictly and they have to learn about a bunch of stuff that they don't care about.
To a certain degree, when people talk about social media and the phones and the watches, I think there's a little bit of exaggeration there, and I go like, it's not that bad. But then sometimes I'll see a young person walking down the street, looking at their phone with their hood. They have their hoodie up, they have headphones, and they're looking at the phone and they're walking. Or I'll see like a group of group of people sitting at McDonald's the way I used to do with my friends, and they're all on their phones. And it's kind of creepy. There's something creepy to it. I don't know whether it really does the damage that some people who be very alarmist about this, but when you watch like people completely like zombified, there's a bit of zombie thing going on when there's a group of them and they're just all looking at their phones and not looking at each other or talking to each other. Every now and then they'll show each other the phone. They'll be like, "Hi, look at this crocodile swimming in a swimming pool." Maybe I'm too old for this. It's a generational thing.
Think so completely. I do think that there is an issue, a systemic issue, which is that the apps that we use on our phones are designed expertly to grab our attention. So they're essentially like, they feel good because they're constantly giving us a steady, this kind of flow state, where you're constantly paying attention, but it's quite effortless. And so your attention is grabbed. And that's a very positive feeling. It's very rewarding. But at the same time, it steals your attention, right? It's not respecting your agency. I think this is something that we should definitely keep in mind. It's just like, over the past century, there has been more and more talk about how desk jobs and sitting a lot has made it so that your back is used to just sitting and not being active. And it's very comfortable to sit, but it's not very good long-term for your back. It's the same idea that when your attention, it's like a muscle, when your attention isn't being used, then it atrophies.
Right.
And it, in the long term, causes damage.
That's a good comparison. Yeah, we have changed as a result of sitting so much. That's a really good comparison. Would you say that it's like a muscle?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
you can train it. You can train
it like a muscle.
And it's something that you have some control over, but it's also something that kind of does its own thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important here to mention that for some people it's easier than for others.
Yes.
And there's individual differences and, like attention deficit disorder. It's a thing. And I think to some degree, yes, you can train it, but we also need to consider individual differences.
I think that's one of the most challenging things when you have a class. When you have a class of people and you have the curriculum, as you say, and you have time scales and you have to get certain topics done within a time frame, that is one of the most challenging things. I think every teacher tries to differentiate as much as they can, but it's only possible within certain limits, to a certain extent. Yeah.
Talking about, a systemic view of things, this is essentially that our society is built for getting results. We're result oriented and not we're not respectful of people's agency. So what school essentially is a kind of training for the rest of your life, where you're going to have to get stuff done so that you get results and you can present these results to your bosses or whatever. Yeah. And there's very little respect for students' agency. They might not travel the best path. They might make mistakes. They might do some damage, but that's kind of part of what learning is all about. You have to make your own mistakes, because if you're constantly being told what to do, you're always going to be rebelling and always going to be making things more difficult than they need to be. At least that's the way I see it.
Yeah, and I also have immense understanding and empathy for teachers who, are working within the system and they're trying to do their best, but at the end you're there mostly alone with a whole class. You can't reach everybody at the same time.
Would you say that free school idea is more conducive to the development of transformational learning? I don't know the names of these. There are free schools in the UK.
I think also here in Austria.
Where it's voluntary, right?
Yeah, basically where students can
Students
decide them for themselves.
choose, yeah.
I have to say that actually, this type of schools, they require a high degree of organizational skills and for students to be able to manage with everything that they need to do, because they have a lot of freedom, but
Yeah.
they still need to get things done. So I don't think it's a system that's suitable for all students. Perhaps it is more conducive to transformational learning, but I don't have personal experience, so I am afraid to make any claims.
I mean, it's quite a controversial topic because a lot of people say, well, they're children. They don't know. They're not adults. As you said, their brain is developing. We don't let them drive cars. And I suppose that's translated to other things, and maybe there's overreach.
Well, I think the issue is when we think of teaching and learning as a one-directional process, that it's the teacher that knows everything, that is just spreading their wisdom and knowledge, and the children are supposed to absorb that kind of passively. Instead, I think if it's an open-ended conversation, well, that's where learning happens on both ends. So ideally, the transformation isn't just for the students, it's also for the teachers themselves. Yes, sure, as people that have already been on the earth for a little bit longer, we know some things.
We have
And
experience.
we have some experience. And we learned some stuff, and we would love to share that, because that's the whole point. We don't want to start from an empty state the whole time.
Yeah.
We build on whatever we learned before.
Yeah, and we share our I mean, I share my failures as well. It's
and you
very
can
important
learn
to-
from other people's failures, and that's wisdom.
Yeah.
But we can also learn so much from children and from young people, and I think we often forget that.
It's a really good point. Can you talk? I actually don't know what this is. Can you tell me about contemplative practice? I don't know what this is.
I mean, this is kind of a catch-all term. We're both part of the kind of very new contemplative education network. And we attended one of the meetings, and, one of the challenges was actually defining what exactly contemplative education is. In this way, contemplative practice is also something vague. It can be prayer, can be meditation, can be dance, it can be all sorts of things, like different exercises. Essentially anything that invites introspection is how I would approach it. So instead of constantly trying to learn on a very cerebral level, a very kind of rational level, always trying to put together logical arguments, understanding abstract thought, these are very useful things, but contemplative practice is more about consulting sort of different layers of the rest of you. It's not, your mind and your body is not put together entirely of rational thinking, and by rational thinking I just mean logical and abstract. It is very much an intelligence, right? The rest of your body is very much an intelligence, and it is, I think contemplative practices are about tapping into the inner intelligence or inner wisdom of your body, your mind, your emotions.
Is that a way of discovering what you called before the inner compass?
I would say so. Yeah, that's a nice connection to make. I think contemplative practice is simply all practices that help you tap into different ways of knowing,
Right.
and different ways of also knowing yourself. And so when we, as you were talking before with the example of eating as potentially being a mindfulness practice, and it's having so many things that we take for granted. What if we look at it with fresh eyes? What if we look at ourselves with fresh eyes and, the wonder of being? And I think that then we can, really tap into this inner compass that seems to have some shared qualities and a shared direction amongst people.
If a person does this and they realize that they need certain things and don't need other things, that would that be a way of them increasing their agency?
Sometimes it's not enough. Like contemplative practice is not enough for you to know what you want and don't want, but then to, do something about it. So it needs to also be integrated in some kind of wider ethical framework, but also a framework that helps you translate your contemplative insights into action.
Yeah, and I think part of this is that you're constantly in interaction with your environment, with others. And the way our cognition works is very much that we kind of project our own inner ideas onto the world, and we try to confirm these ideas. So this is why rational thought, for example, is not enough alone, because the way we behave and the way we approach the world is an entire mind-body kind of intention. And contemplative practice can help you explore, okay, how do these layers interact that are inside me, and what kind of direction are they taking me in? But in the end, you're going to have to test out your inner compass, and you will run into making big mistakes and having to go through difficult experiences. And these are the moments where, mindfulness and contemplative practice can once again help you to approach these very difficult experiences with a learning mindset, where you allow the difficult experience to change you and show you something new, instead of it just being something terrible that then you want to avoid.
Okay.
May I add something here that I think might be important, because we are talking a lot about mindfulness and contemplative practice, and that this entails many different practices. So the different practices, they also help us train slightly different skills. There are some practices that help you train your attention, which are, say, more focused attention practices. Then there's others where you train having open awareness, where you learn how to let everything come and go more freely. Then there's others that are focused on cultivating compassion for ourselves and others. And those are mostly practices that we do by ourselves. There's other practices that we do together with other people. And those, I think, are also very important, because there we learn how to translate more directly mindfulness into the sphere of relationship and connection. And there's other ones as well that are tackling more systemic issues and working with bigger systems, say with multiple people, or also kind of integrating the global aspect.
How do you find people to do this? How do you, if you want to make this change, how do you get a group to start doing this and experimenting with this?
I think this is a challenge that we're currently exploring. What age group is open to this kind of exploration, what kind of people, and also what we can do to be a bit more convincing. Because there is some part of it where you have to make your case for why this is important. And I think we're getting to a point as a global society that we're starting to understand that there's issues with attention, that there's issues with our intentions, that our current system is not working, but we're not sure how to change it. And so this is very much what I think we try to explore, is how do you promote change when there's a need for it?
Change is already happening. I mean, people all around the globe are practicing, and they're already doing...
And we wouldn't have had this conversation maybe 30 years ago. At least I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's already happening.
It is happening, yeah.
There's this quote, which I don't know exactly, but it's from a systems thinker, and the idea is that in moments of great chaos, even small islands of coherence can lead to great change. And I think this is already kind of happening, where you see that there's more and more change happening in isolated places and within certain bubbles. But I think what we are trying to do with Cometa is to do a bit more translational work where we try to bring these practices also outside of these bubbles and into education or, other contexts where they're not as common.
I mean, what's interesting is what you said about rational, that it's not necessarily rational. Because if you were to walk into my theater class, people would be like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, people would be rolling around on the floor, doing vocal warm-ups, jumping around. I mean, it looks a bit crazy. And generally dancing, like if I'm at home and there's a good tune, like my family and I, we all start dancing. Does this have a meaning? Does this have a purpose? Not really. We're kind of just like moving. And it requires, I suppose, if you were to get people on board, it requires taking a risk, right? You have to take a risk to try dance. Some people don't want to do it. Some people physically just, I'm not dancing. I'm going to stand here. So it does require you to step out of what we normally do, our normal movements and our normal speech, and just take a risk.
I'm happy you bring this up because I think that, this is something that we're trained to do, to act in a certain way. And this is more dictated from our left brain hemisphere, which is really focused on kind of structure, logic, being presentable. And our whole society seems to really support this type of being in the world. While the right brain hemisphere, which is more creative and even wild, is more comfortable with these sort of more animalistic practices, I would say. That
it is kind of animalistic, right?
They bring us closer to our embodied nature. And if we are a little bit maybe ashamed of that, or we don't want to be seen in that way, we just stray away from these practices. So it takes some time to build trust with ourselves and trust also in the environment, that it's safe to be as we are. It's safe to show these parts of ourselves. It's safe to be a little bit more of an animal.
It's funny because if you see any kind of dance or theater, if you start with primary and you see the body movements, the patterns of movement from those children until they start to reach at about 11, 12, I would say, it changes so much. Even the range will be some here, it's all very constricted and very reserved, and all of a sudden it's hard for even to have any kind of loose movement. When that self-consciousness kicks in, there's a massive change in the movement of children. And then it's hard to break. It's hard to have them be more free, physically free.
And I mean, part of it is simply being a teenager. Yeah. So you have all of this self-consciousness about your body changing.
People are looking at me.
Yeah, exactly. But at the same time, when you have a society that is totally promoting that and doesn't want you to move freely and make weird sounds in the hallway and whatever, then you're just gonna train that and you're gonna continue just restricting yourself.
I realize we're pressed for time. So a part of the underlying theme of this podcast is what you didn't learn at school and perhaps should have. And when I heard about what you guys are doing, when I saw your workshop, I was like, that is it. You guys are on the right path. What do you think we should have learned at school and didn't?
I think for me, it would have been that your emotions are there to guide you and to help you navigate your life. They're not the enemy. This is quite a difficult thing, I think, to believe when you're a teenager, especially given how I was raised and how many of us are raised, I think. But at least, somebody is there to tell you this.
I would agree. I think I would have appreciated a little bit more guidance on, how to be human, because it really felt like growing up, I had to figure out a lot of things by myself, and it just would have been a bit easier to know that I'm not my emotions, I'm not my thoughts. I'm also that, but I'm also much more.
I'm so happy that you had that you gave me your time today. Thank you so much. You gave me lots of food for thought, and I wish you all the best of luck with Cometa and the future projects.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. This was great.
This was awesome. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.